So, just talking about kind of, I think, um, it's kind of like mentality around holidays and eating and just how you're treating your body. I mean, training fits right in there too. But thinking about like we just passed Halloween, Thanksgiving's coming up,
Right.
and the question of what do I do after these holidays? Likely now, someone's asking, I've overeaten. What do I actually do? Or someone can also be proactive about it and say, hey, how do I approach these holidays from a training aspect? What do you? I mean, even training, personal. What do you do when you approach these holidays?
Yeah. Nothing changes. If anything, I treat it as a rest week, right? So if I'm going to go to, away for the holidays for like 2, 3 days for Thanksgiving, then I'm training that month uh, to make sure that that's taken into consideration. So I'm gonna take it easy during the holidays. There's no need to put. I used to put a lot of pressure on myself on the holidays and try to like work out before Thanksgiving and keep my routine up when I was around the family. And if you can do that, I think that's cool. But usually when you go travel in, it's a little bit harder to get to your gym or to make time because you're trying to see your family. So I just incorporate it as a rest week, man. Like I go pretty hard that month leading up, and then I allow myself to take a break and relax and just be present and enjoy the time
Yeah,
because
man.
it's only a day or two. It's that's not going to break my year, right? And we need rest periods, so I just incorporate it as such. That's it.
Well, let me ask you that because you just said a rest a week there versus it's just 2 days.
Okay.
What do you I think I definitely understand where you're going with this. We have the same mentality around it. But going from a week to 2 days, like what is that difference when you end up talking about that?
It's just like, well, so if I'm doing, training, like I might be working out 6 days a week, and be doing that for months, right? So, I'm on a pretty tough schedule. So, then if I want to take like a rest week, it just means I might still be lifting or exercising, but you tone down the intensity a little bit, and
Sure.
taking and that's all, right? So I never really take a week off from the gym. It just means that I lower my intensity on those workouts. I'm not
Hmm.
worried about like lifting my heaviest weight or running my fastest. It's just keeping the body moving to feel good, just like get the juices flowing. But I'm not worried about like making almost more in maintenance mode, not trying to like, make these crazy strides, right?
Yeah.
Necessarily.
Yeah.
I just kind of feel it out in the gym. If I feel good, I'll lift a lot of weight. Otherwise, I'm just like, hey, let's just have fun in there, right? And but the days of the holidays, when I say like 2 days off, I mean like I take the 2 days off, right? It can feel good. I just don't want the mental pressure of I have to keep my routine up when I'm in family. It's like your environment's just changed, So I prepare to plan ahead, or I'd rather plan ahead and get all the things that I need done training wise to feel good, even mentally, right? With being able to let go. So then when I'm with family, I can just relax and not have that pressure.
Yeah, for sure. You know what? I think I love what you're saying about the lowering the intensity, kind of maintenance. And I think a lot of our action starts with our thoughts, right? With how we're actually thinking. It starts in our brain, right? So um, our thought will always precede action. And so once we actually accept the fact that we can take this week differently than usual, I think it's definitely good. One thing I'd love to talk about with people is just dedicated movement. Right. We don't have to make it something like a workout. You're not hitting PRs. You don't need to be doing a hit workout, however you want to define it. It can just be
Right.
whatever it is, right? So just a dedicated movement. Hey, ask your family if they want to go on a walk. Go on a walk yourself. If you want to go on a run, make it a run. If you want to make it a lift, make it a lift. But a dedicated movement that you've done something where you had to decide and kind of go and do it, but not to overwhelm yourself, I think is just
Yeah.
so important. It's a little bit, and I think this phrase gets a bad rap, but like to just check the box, it does. I mean, like if someone checks the box and not trying, I think that's one thing. But sometimes in this situation, say like it's a whole week, and you were talking about traveling, if someone goes and visits their family, like just check the box for movement, but make sure it's a dedicated movement. Don't kind of look back and in your day, be like, oh well, you know what, you know what, I actually did take the stairs a couple times, and then like you know what, I didn't eat at the dinner table, I actually ate in the living room, so I like walked from there to there. It's like, no, like that's not the dedicated movement. Like it's you premeditating this kind of thing, right? I
Mm.
will, after breakfast, go on a walk, right? I will, go to the park and play with the dog. But something that's dedicated, I think, is so important. So check that box and then just kind of move forward. I think that's always really important.
Yeah.
I have one more thought here around people going into a holiday, and this happens with vacations too, where they start to try and develop these new habits. They go somewhere, they're like, oh, I'm going to go back home, but you know what? That's when I'm going to start to watch my eating on Thanksgiving, right? And it's like, you know what? I'm gonna start to get active, and then all of a sudden, the family's like, what are you doing? Do you usually do this? Why? I don't know. Like, there's so many like variables changing when
Yeah.
like you have this like social interaction with your family, with friends, that you're just missing out on. Like, don't try and change something when you haven't done it before in a moment that you're already probably trying to kind of ground your feet in.
Yeah.
So I see that all the time. Someone's like, no, 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 I'm going to go to Thanksgiving and I'm going to, no, like you should have already developed these habits. So, we are right now a couple weeks out from Thanksgiving, but I would tell someone that they're going to be more successful with really starting to set those habits right now instead of trying to reactively or retroactively kind of like try and take care of something like do a turkey burn the next day and try and burn off all the calories they ate, because you won't. You know what, you're going to go do your turkey trap 5K the day before. You're going to think you burned so many calories you can eat more than you're thinking, okay, I'm going to do my turkey burn the next day. You're only going to burn 400 calories anyway. Like
Yeah, man.
you ate 1,000 calories of mashed potatoes and gravy. Like you're not making a dent there. So like get your habits
Sounds amazing.
now. And I think the one silver bullet everybody has for any of these situations is just your overall awareness of your satiety and satisfaction. Like,
Yeah.
slow down your eating. Know when you're satisfied. Know when you're actually satiated at a meal, right? Don't eat so fast because you're like, well, you know what? I don't want to I kind of want to be in the moment with my family. And so I don't want to stop eating, and we're all connecting over eating, right? Slow down your eating. Like, put down your fork, people say, right? I always tell people to like share at least two stories at like the dinner table. Make it a bad story. I don't really care, but share stories, make it a conversation, just like you said, be present. If we're only thinking about either the restriction or kind of going ahead and binging on food, like we're not present, we're just kind of at the food at that point, right? So there's so many things here. I never love the question of what do we do after Thanksgiving to make up for what we did, right? It's just
Yeah,
such a
it's not about that. Yeah, it's
that's
definitely
me.
not about that. It's like
Yeah.
we always go from like two ends of the spectrum. It's always the extremes. It's either like I'm extremely like conscious of like my training, and so I'm gonna be on a macro diet and weigh my food during Thanksgiving,
Yeah,
or
of
it's
course.
the extreme end of screw it, I'm just gonna eat everything I want. It's a day off, like I'm gonna go way overboard, right? It's like be in the middle. Like, like I look at it like you can still like eat relatively healthy on Thanksgiving, right? Like if you really think about it, like turkey's great, right? Potatoes are fantastic. You have a bunch of vegetables. So like you can portion your plate still. Like you don't have to throw everything out the window. But then I'm also a big fan of like uh if you want a piece of pumpkin pie, like have it, right? Or if you just have a craving, like just have a bite. Like I'm even like that in my daily life of, if I'm craving something sweet, have a bite. And if you want more, have a little bit more. But oftentimes, sometimes a bite or two, it kind of satiates you, and you're like, that's really all I need. You don't have to, have two or three pieces, right? Because like you said, slow down a little bit. Like let your body catch up to itself. Maybe you just like kind of hit everything you needed. We don't
Mhm.
have to go fully overboard, and you don't also have to fully restrict yourself. Like there's a middle ground where you can enjoy, and you're not eating to feel miserable either because you ate too much.
Yeah, totally. This is just reminding me. I basically have like 9 pitfalls or 9 challenges that I always share with all of my clients, and like before these holidays, and it's usually for like events and holidays. Like, oh, I'm going to this thing for work, and there's going to be food. I'm going to a wedding, and so I always say, okay, good. Like these are the 9 things that trip people up most of the time, and a lot of them are going to be certain things around like trying to not eat before you go, right? And then trying to not being aware of hydration, or allowing someone to be the one who kind of gets you to eat more, right? They're kind of, oh, you have to eat more, you have to do this, right? So there's
Sure.
basically nine things that kind of get in people's way, and it challenges them at these kind of times. But the first thing before we get into those is always like, well, what is your goal? Like when you end up approaching a holiday, like a Thanksgiving or any other holidays, like coming out of the holiday, what is your goal, right? If you don't know what you want, you have nothing to achieve. Always say that. So it's something where like, okay, if your goal coming out of Thanksgiving, if someone says, I want to lose 10 pounds, coming out of Thanksgiving, I'm probably going to be like, no, it doesn't make sense. I don't think you're going to do that. But I'm going to say, why don't we think about the feeling you have? Do you want to maybe exit Thanksgiving feeling as if you were in control? Okay, great, right? Let's say that you're in control. So we always want to make a goal that's going to be very specific and measurable. So something like I'm going to be in control, and we always kind of talk about someone like their feeling of satiety on like this like 1 through 5 scale. So yeah, why don't we try and make sure that you're never over a 4, like that kind of thing, right? And try and kind of set that, but then kind of say, okay, like here's 9 things that will trip you up, but select 3 of them. And so your success will be just making sure you focus on those 3, but don't focus on all 9, right? Focus on just these 3, and that can kind of push you through. Whether you're focusing on hydration, whether you're focusing on a dedicated movement, whether you're focusing on social comebacks, right? For the person who's kind of pushing more on you when you want to have it, or like what you were saying, like the plate model. Sometimes I'm always saying like, hey, as juvenile as a plate model is, quarter starch, quarter protein, half the plate being vegetable. Well, do that, but have 7 plates. I'd rather you have 7 plates of that and feel actually satisfied and satiated than you thinking you can only have one, right?
Yeah,
Um,
you can eat well.
but yeah, there's always strategies to go about doing this, but I think it comes down to you knowing what you want and then just kind of setting the foot forward in terms of like, how to do it. You just have to have that plan, I think, going in, which is always
Yeah.
important.
What helps me too is like thinking more broadly, right? So think about like I always think like this, like think long term and think more about your year versus the day, right? Like I think a lot of these problems are, like come from people thinking about issues, in singularity, thinking about things in a single day. Like I got to accomplish this day, I got to be healthy on this day, and I'm like, well. You broaden the perspective a little bit, right? So, like, if throughout the year, right, like I'm training out of 365 days, if I'm training over 300 of those days, right, and like eating relatively well on like 300 of those days, over 90% of the time, then me going into Thanksgiving for a day, I'm not overly concerned, right?
Yeah.
Because like a day is not going to ruin your year, right? So a day is not going to ruin your workouts. A day of food and eating is not going to ruin things. It's the I think we run into these questions because it's usually the people that want to be, in a good training routine and want to be eating healthy, but they haven't found the groove yet, right? So they haven't been in this training routine, and then they look at these holidays of like, shoot, I don't want to go overboard, right? Because maybe you haven't been working out, you haven't been eating healthy, and then going into the holidays, it's going to be more of that and more indulgence, right? And so you might put more pressure on yourself that day. But if you already have good habits established and you're worried about and you're thinking to yourself, I'm committed to being healthy for the year, right, and taking my training seriously, my nutrition seriously for the year, that's why then you don't have this stress and this pressure over the holiday. You see it more of a place of enjoyment. So think broader, right? We're going to be in this for the long run.
Yeah, dude, th- patience. I think you're starting to tiptoe into that idea of like patience, right?
Yeah.
Because people who believe that the one day of eating more at a calorie surplus or not training is going to knock all their goals, or they're going to start moving backwards, right?
Right.
That tells me that if someone believes that they're not patient and they don't actually see what you're talking about, right? That long-term type of vision.
Yeah.
um, and patience, I think, is one thing people need to be able to practice more, and 2 things I know have taught me more patience than anything: strength training and investing. Those are 2 things that have taught me patience, if anything. And if you start
Yeah.
looking at like the micro day to day, you're only going to kind of drive yourself nuts.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. Right. So it's analyzing trends, right? Investing is a great example because it's always the same principles. Like with training and with investing, sometimes you might hit some like stride, early on, right? And you can get lucky with investing, but remember that it's luck, right? Because like we can't predict. So you play long term and you analyze trends. And so that's what I look at from a training side too. Again, out of 365 days, we're looking for a year. I'm worried about the percentages, like how percentage wise, how often did you train? Percentage wise, how often did you, eat, healthy to fuel for performance, right? And then you have a compound effect, and people got to realize this. Like, if you, my goal with training is how many days can I string together in a row of good days where I'm at the gym, I trained hard, I'm recovering well, I'm eating well, right? Like we know like in my mind, I have an idea of what 100% looks like on training and nutrition, like the perfect day, right? And I'm hitting all these boxes for myself of eating like 5, 6 times a day, getting my protein needs, I'm sleeping well, I'm training at a high level. That's 100%. Realistically, you're not going to hit that every day. We're human beings, right? But I'm trying to hit that 100%. And then my goal is how many days in a row can I string those together, right? Because the more that I have those together in a row, the more results I'm going to get. They compound, right? Just like in investing. In your first week, you're not going to see it. Maybe in your first month, you start to a little, but like the rewards start to get pretty big, and you start to see these changes like after months and years, right? Once we start talking years of stringing this stuff together, you're going to see you start to see these results and the momentum building up, and you feel good and you know what that feels like, right? But if you don't string them together in a row, you're not going to feel that. You're not going to understand what that feels like, right? So that's why I'm always like, think long term, right? I'm not worried about you having a bad day. I'm worried about you having a bad month, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then there's one important area too. I think I'm kind of curious to get your take on this. Um, but I'm kind of thinking about the resilience or like the bounce back, right? And maybe help me out with a better way to say this because there is a word to describe it better. But just, when somebody maybe does, they aren't able to string together, they can't keep that continuous string, right? They have to maybe miss a day and they feel as if they kind of, they didn't get the workout and they wanted to. So the string is broken. One thing like you're talking about is like I care more about your month is how you bounce back and get back into it, and it's
Right.
almost like how you can refocus yourself. But I think a lot of people too, when we can build that resilience to say, oh no, it's fine, okay, look, Sunday wasn't great, maybe Monday wasn't, but I'm right there, I'm right there today, it's Tuesday, right? So it's only been 2 days and you're kind of back at it. And if you do zoom out a little bit and you're like, oh wow, that was 2 days out of a full month, it does become a little bit more clear in terms of how successful you are. I think
Right.
people kind of miss their ability to kind of give themselves the credit they deserve. Um, but let me just ask you about that kind of that like bounce back and that resilience.
Yeah.
How do you refocus and kind of get yourself back or get maybe your clients kind of like back into it after they feel like they've fallen off?
Sometimes it's just a matter of like kind of giving yourself a little bit of grace, right? So like even myself personally, if I have fallen off, in some days, honestly, this happened to me like last week. There was like a Monday, I was just so tired, right? And usually on Mondays, I'll have a lift and a conditioning session, like it's part of my routine. So like even my body's kind of ready for it, right? I have the time blocked off. But this particular day, like I've been working so much, some abnormal hours that I was really tired on Monday, and I was trying to push through, but like I couldn't do it. Like I was even in the gym lifting. I'm like my body's just not having it, right? And so on days like that, like even when my clients are feeling that way, they're like, man, I'm like down in the dumps, or like the gym doesn't feel good, or like I'm not excited to be here. I'm like, go home, right? So like even like myself, I went home, I went to sleep, and like that's where I've learned. And it is simple, but I get that it's a mental battle where it's kind of hard to let go sometimes. But I think it's that simple of like give yourself grace and go home, right? And like I think, hey, I'm gonna go get it on Tuesday, right? So I'd rather, instead of being tired and not feeling it, or I was way too busy, I'm slammed, all that stuff. Some days it's good to pack it in, go home, eat well, hydrate, get your good night's rest, feel good, kill it the next day. So then I just make a commitment to myself of tomorrow, I'm going to go full out, right? I'm going to allow myself rest today. I'm going to go in and get it. And then I go back into thinking about the week. How can I accomplish and kill this week, right? Because those days are going to happen. It's okay. But again, always keep in mind like the trend versus the minor day. I
Yeah,
just,
man.
it's okay.
I think it's tough when you work with very high performing individuals and very type A people,
Sure.
right? And so so it's just again kind of keep that macro thing kind of in mind. But yeah, man, I think overall when we start to look at these holidays, we become so micro aware, so like hyper focused on these one days. I mean, the best advice is start making those habits early now. One day is not going to throw you off, and
No.
just make sure that your routine is that strong and get back into it. I think, that's how you should kind of attack it. So start early, start now, so that you don't end up kind of hurting your mind
Yeah, man.
going forward
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
It's easier to give yourself grace and like when you say the type A person, like, I kind of consider myself that. I think you are too. I've had to learn that rest is productive, right?
Mhm.
So I actually learned and understood in my mind. Before it was like, it was just black and white or binary in the sense of I got to work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard, right? And so you just grind, grind, grind. You think to yourself, no days off. It's like this grind culture, and that just beats you into the ground. So like even when I don't feel good, when I used to think this way, I would still go to the gym, and I would probably do more harm than good. And so you actually learn that, all right, I'm going to hit overtraining that way. My weights that I can lift actually go down because your body's not fully recovered or adapted. So you actually start to hurt yourself. So when you actually learn that, you realize that rest and sleeping is you being productive. That is you helping with your training so that tomorrow I can lift more. And every time that I do that and I get some sleep, and I just go focus on my food instead of the gym on that day, the next day you do have a better day at the gym. So that then you start to, correlate, matching all these things up, that it's not just about the gym. It's a piece of the puzzle, right? But there's so much more than that, right? Focus on your food, and then everything changes when you start to get that momentum and you give yourself that grace. The pressure goes off a little bit when you can say, yeah, it's okay. I do need to go home and get that rest.
Yeah, I think grace is a good point. A great way to describe it for sure. Well, not enough people kind of do that. I don't think we give ourselves enough grace, or
I know it's
even
hard.
others. So I hear that, man. And everyone is afraid of taking a step back, not losing the progress that they've made. And you know what? I think sometimes if you go in with your goal of, you know, I always say, like with nutrition too, like the number one goal is at least to maintain muscle mass, right?
Right.
So if you know kind of like what the least amount you can do is, like 2 days of some sort of resistance, just eating enough protein, getting your sleep. If those three things, and if you can give yourself grace and be like, no, I already got my 2 workouts in, I know I'm eating okay right now. Let me just focus on my protein. Let me just focus on my sleep.
Yeah.
You're definitely not going to make progress. And what did you say before about um, like sleep being progress, or the that grace of sleeping and eating and hydrating, like that is progress in itself.
Yeah, it's productive. Yeah.
It's not always about making hitting a higher weight, or seeing a lower body fat percentage. So it's a really great way to say it, Joe. You did a good
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
Thanks, dude.
Yeah, man.
Well, man, I hope everyone has a good holiday. I think they will.
Yeah, they will. They will.
Take these into account. Cool, man. Anything else in the holiday front?
No, man, I'm just gonna enjoy some good old food, some family time, some jokes, some laughs, get refreshed, and then we'll get back at it, sir.
Yep. Well, give the family a hug for me.
Same.
All right,
What
dude.
you
Take
do,
care.
man?